Imagine a painter who has no arms, or even a photographer who can't see. Well, in my case, a musician and composer who could no longer hear. Deafness was the tragic reality I faced in the later years of my life. Although my personal life had been triumphant in many ways, it had also been characterized with great sorrow and unfortunate tragedies, the main one being the loss of my hearing. My story began with my childhood. My father, a violent alcoholic, used aggressive techniques to force music lessons on me when I was just 5 years old. He wanted me to turn into this prodigy like Mozart was, but despite the abuse I received as a child, I still embraced my interest for music. Eventually working with my first major music instructor, Christian Neef, is what enabled me to become a professional musician by the age of 11. By 16, I got the incredible honor of actually performing for the great Mozart. I started off with a very promising career ahead of me, but my personal life was still full of hardships. I was just a teenager when I lost 3 of my siblings and my beloved mother. My father had turned back to drinking, and his alcoholism worsened as a result. I was still a young adult, only 16, when I was forced to become my family's caretaker and eventually the head of the household. If that wasn't enough, around 1801, I began to hear this constant buzzing in my ears. I was no longer able to hear high and low pitches of sound. I had written in a letter, "My greatest faculty, my hearing, is greatly deteriorating." I had realized I was becoming deaf and would no longer have a crucial element as a musician, my ability to hear. I was faced with a possible end to my career as a virtuoso pianist. I had written in the 1802 Heiligenstadt Testament, "I would have ended my life. It was only my art that held me back." I had also wrote to a friend, "How can I, a musician, say to people, I am deaf? I shall, if I can, defy this fate, even though there will be times when I shall be the unhappiest of God's creatures." My constant determination to overcome my many struggles, physical, emotional, my refusal to lose faith, and most importantly, my strong passion for music are part of what motivated me to continue composing and performing, even with the immense suffering of my hearing loss. Now, my triumphant impact on music history in the 19th century began with the style in which I composed my pieces. Rather than let my discovery of my hearing handicap obstruct my compositions, my unique individualistic style only strengthened from there, and it led to my greatest works. I expanded the range of the piano, as well as create more emotional depth within them, which most composers hadn't done before. The way I utilize different keys and unanticipated notes, forming these new harmonic ideas, develop story in my various pieces. I refuse to follow the current traditional musical standards where music was balanced, orderly, and in good taste. My more dramatic and emotional compositions, written as revolts against the classical period, were a bridge for what later defined and became known as the Romantic era of music. I, Ludwig van Beethoven, became the musician who transitioned those two crucial periods of music, ending the strict, formal, and controlled form of the classical era. Music could now be highly expressive and represent emotion and individual feelings of the composer. My influence on the transformation of musical form became the basis for future musicians and composers such as Brahms, Liszt, Chopin, Schumann, Schubert. My image is highly reflected through the works of these major composers of the Romantic period. Now, one of my greatest works, written while fully deaf, and is possibly the most well-known melody of my many compositions, Fior Elise, is a piano piece I will perform for you now. Please enjoy.